Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We all want to understand things, really get to the heart of it.
But nobody wants to feel like they need a PhD just to follow along, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we take these complex topics, the research and the studies, and we try to really pull out the pieces that are going to matter most to you.
Yeah, think of us as like we're running the mental marathon for you. So you can just, relax and enjoy the view.
Exactly. We sift through all the complicated stuff. We highlight the key insights. We connect the dots and try to paint a clear picture.
So you can see that bigger picture quickly and clearly.
Exactly. And today, we're diving headfirst into something that I think you're going to find really, really fascinating, and that's how we make decisions. You shared with us some excerpts from Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational.
And let me tell you, those pages are just jam-packed with all sorts of interesting insights and surprises about why we choose the things we do.
Yeah. Why we make the decisions we make, and it's not always logical, right?
Often in ways that don't seem logical.
That's right. Clearly, you're curious about what drives our behavior, maybe even a little bit about why you make choices that you later regret.
That's right.
So what we're going to try to do today is really unpack some of the core ideas from Ariely's work. Those aha moments where you suddenly realize, oh, that's why I do that, or that's why that happens.
It's amazing how often we fall into these patterns.
Yes, and they are predictable, which is the really crazy part.
That's right.
All right, so let's jump right in. And I think one of the first things that's really important to talk about is this concept of relativity. And it sounds really simple, right? We decide based on what's around us. But it's a little bit more nuanced than that, isn't it?
It really is. It's not just about what's around us. It's about what we're comparing things to, because we rarely make choices in a vacuum.
Right. And what's so interesting to me is how easily our perspective can be shifted just by the options that are given to us. So, one of the best examples from the book, I think, is this economist subscription example.
Oh, yeah.
Where they had an online-only option, and then they had a print-only option, and that was $125.
Okay.
And then they had a print and online bundle for also $125.
Right.
Now, logically, why would anybody choose the print-only option when you could get both print and online for the same price?
Right.
Just doesn't make sense.
It's totally irrational.
So that print-only option seems totally pointless. But here's where the real genius of this comes in. Ariely suggests that the economist wasn't really trying to sell a lot of those print-only subscriptions at all.
Right.
That $125 print-only option was a decoy. It was there to make that $125 print and online bundle look like a way better deal.
It's all relative.
It is all relative. And so this is something to keep in mind for you listening out there in the world. If you see what seems like a kind of unnecessary extra option, be wary of it. It might be there just to make something else look better by comparison.
Absolutely. It might not be the best choice for you in absolute terms, right? But next to that other option, it seems like a steal.
Exactly. And we tend to do this a lot. We compare things that are easy to compare.
Right.
So thinking about internet only versus print and internet, it's a little bit more mental work. Do you really value that digital access more, or do you like having that physical magazine in your hands?
Yeah.
But when you throw in that print only option at the same price as the bundle, it becomes really, really simple.
Yeah. Yeah, the decision's basically made for you.
Relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Now, and this isn't just about magazine subscriptions. This plays out in all different areas of our lives. Like if you think about something like house hunting.
Okay.
Ariely describes a scenario where there are 3 houses, 2 very similar traditional style houses, and then a more modern house. And they're all in roughly the same price range.
Okay.
Now imagine one of those traditional houses has a very obvious problem. Let's say it has a leaky roof.
Okay.
And because of that, they've reduced the price a little bit. Suddenly, that other traditional house, the one without the problems, looks way more appealing.
Oh. Not just compared to that modern house, but especially when you compare it to that traditional house with the leaky roof.
Right.
So that house with the leaky roof almost acts as a decoy.
That's right.
It's subtly pushing you towards that other traditional house.
Yeah, it makes the decision easier.
Right.
You don't even realize it's happening.
And this decoy effect, I think, is one of the most fascinating things. It's surprisingly strong.
It really is.
Like Ariely did an experiment with photos of students. So they showed people a regular photo, and then they showed them a slightly less attractive, digitally altered version of that same person. And then they showed them a photo of a completely different person who was equally attractive to the original photo.
Okay.
And what they found was that the presence of that slightly worse decoy version of the photo actually made people more likely to choose the original photo.
Wow.
That unaltered photo of the same person, because it gave them a really easy, clear comparison point.
Yeah, it's that easy comparison that our brains just love.
They do. They love it. Like, it makes me think about the story of the Williams-Sonoma bread machine.
Oh, yeah.
So when they first introduced this bread maker, it was like $275.
Okay.
And sales were just okay. You know, people weren't sure if they really needed a bread maker.
Yeah, $275 is a decent chunk of change.
It's a chunk of change for a bread maker. So what they did is they brought in a second bread maker that was bigger, fancier looking, and significantly more expensive.
Oh.
Suddenly, that original $275 model didn't seem so bad.
Not at all.
Compared to that new higher-end one, it looked like a pretty reasonable deal.
Yeah.
And guess what?
Sales went up.
Sales of the original bread maker jumped.
Incredible.
It's incredible just by giving people that point of comparison. Even if that comparison wasn't what they ended up choosing, you can completely change how they see the value.
Yeah, and that's something to be really wary of as a consumer, right?
It is. And marketers know this, right?
Absolutely.
But relativity has kind of a less positive side too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, it can lead to dissatisfaction.
It absolutely can. And this is something that I think we can all relate to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Ariely gives the example of this young executive who's earning a really good salary, right?
Yeah.
Almost $300,000 a year.
Yeah. You think they'd be pretty happy.
You would think they would be ecstatic, right? But this person is actually really unhappy.
Why?
Because the people in the offices next to them who they don't really think are any more capable or talented are making just a little bit more, like $310,000.
And that's all it takes.
It's not about the absolute number.
Right.
It's that relative comparison that just eats away at them.
It just drives them crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because Ariely points out that this thing that happened back in 1993 when executive salaries became public knowledge, you know, everybody thought this was going to be great. This was going to rein in these huge salaries.
Yeah.
It actually might have made things worse.
Might have backfired.
Because it made those relative comparisons so much more obvious.
Yeah, everybody knows what everybody else is making.
Exactly. So what do we do about this in our own lives? Are we just destined to constantly compare ourselves to everyone around us?
Good question.
I mean, Ariely does suggest that we can try to consciously choose our comparison groups, right?
Right. Choose who you're comparing yourself to.
So, you know, maybe if you're at a high school reunion and you're talking to somebody who's bragging about, you know, how much money they make,
Yeah.
maybe you shift your attention to somebody else who's maybe chosen a career path that feels a little bit more aligned with your own values.
Yeah.
Or when you're house hunting, you know, really try to only look at properties that are actually within your budget. Don't even tempt yourself by looking at those multi-million-dollar mansions.
Yeah.
So really trying to control those circles of comparison, I think, can have a huge impact on how we feel.
Absolutely.
And this whole relativity thing, it also affects our spending habits, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Like, we've all done this. You know, if you're in a store and you see a pen and it's $15, but it's on sale for $7 off,
Oh, yeah.
it feels like a big deal.
Feels like a huge discount.
But if you're buying a $500 suit and they knock $7 off, it's like, whatever.
You barely notice it.
It's the same $7, but it feels completely different.
That's right.
And it's the same kind of mental trick that makes it so easy to, you know, add a $200 appetizer to a $5,000 catering bill for your wedding.
Right.
But then we'll, you know, spend 20 minutes searching for a 25-cent coupon for a can of soup at the grocery store.
Right.
Or, you know, we'll happily splurge on those leather seats for our new car, but then hesitate to spend the same amount of money on a beautiful leather armchair for our living room,
Right.
even though we're probably going to use that armchair way more often.
Yeah. It's that immediate relative gain that gets us.
Yeah.
We get so focused on the immediate comparison that we forget to look at the bigger picture.
Exactly. And speaking of relative gains, I think this is a perfect segue into that fascinating story of the Tahitian black pearls.
Oh, yeah.
So initially, nobody wanted these pearls. They were considered undesirable, right?
Right. These dark grayish, kind of odd pearls.
Yeah.
Not your typical beautiful white pearls.
Not at all. So how did they become, you know, a symbol of high-end luxury?
Marketing genius, basically. They position them strategically within the world of fine jewelry, you know, putting them in Harry Winston's window alongside diamond and ruby necklaces and attaching really, really high price tags.
Right.
And suddenly these undesirable pearls became objects of desire.
Just through association and price.
Exactly.
Which leads us perfectly to our next topic, anchoring.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the idea that the first piece of information that we see, especially when it comes to price, can have a really powerful influence on how much we're willing to pay for something later on.
Yeah, it's like that first impression that really sticks with us.
It does. It's almost like imprinting.
You know, like those little goslings following the first moving object they see.
It's crazy.
That is.
So Ariely has this experiment where he has these students and he asks them to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number.
Okay.
And then he asked them to say whether they would be willing to pay that amount for various items. And one of the items is wine.
Okay.
And then they actually had the students bid on those items in an auction.
Oh, wow.
And what do you think happened?
I'm a little nervous to guess.
Well, those students who had higher social security digits, even though those numbers are totally random and have nothing to do with the value of wine,
Of course.
they were willing to bid significantly more for the wine and for all the other products in the auction.
Wow, that's so strange.
Isn't it weird?
It really is.
So he calls this arbitrary coherence. Basically, even though that first number was random once it gets in our heads,
Right.
all our future decisions about price, you know, when we see similar things, we start to judge the value of those items relative to that first number, even though it was arbitrary.
That's wild.
It's totally wild.
So even a random number can become an anchor.
It can. But one thing to keep in mind is that just seeing a price tag doesn't automatically make it an anchor.
Okay.
It really becomes an anchor when you actually actively consider buying the product at that price.
Right. So you have to engage with it in some way.
That's when it really sets in.
You have to contemplate purchasing it.
You do. And once it's set, it's hard to shake. Like,
Yeah.
Ariely had another experiment, and this one was with an annoying sound.
Oh, no?
So they played this oscillating sound, and they asked one group of people if they'd be willing to listen to it again for 10 cents.
Okay.
And then they asked another group if they'd be willing to listen to it in for 90 cents.
Okay.
Later, they came back and they asked all the participants how much money they would demand to listen to the sound again.
Okay.
And the group that was initially anchored at 10 cents,
Yeah.
they were willing to accept a lot less money than the group that was anchored at 90 cents.
Even though they had been shown different price points in between.
Even after seeing different price points, that first anchor really stuck with them.
That's fascinating.
So if we get so anchored to these initial prices, how do new, more expensive things ever become popular?
Right.
Like, let's take Starbucks as an example.
Okay. Yes.
You know, back when Starbucks was first starting to become, you know, a big thing, we were all kind of used to the prices at Dunkin' Donuts and, you know, those regular coffee shops.
Yeah.
How did Starbucks convince us to pay, you know, twice as much, 3 times as much for a cup of coffee?
Right.
Well, this is where Starbucks was really clever. I mean, they deliberately set out to create a completely different experience, a different ambience, as Ariely puts it.
Right. So it's not just about the coffee.
Not just about the coffee. It's about the whole atmosphere,
Right.
the environment.
Like a third place, right?
Yeah.
Between work and home.
Exactly. And by doing that, by making themselves feel so different from those traditional coffee shops, they basically created a whole new category.
Right.
And by doing that, they reset our expectations for what a cup of coffee could cost.
They moved the anchor.
They moved that anchor.
Without us even realizing it.
So sneaky but brilliant.
Right.
So this is something to keep in mind for yourself out there when you're evaluating something new. That initial price that you see it might not be based on any real objective value. It might be based on a very carefully set anchor.
Right.
So be wary of those anchors.
Absolutely.
All right, we've talked about how we compare things and how those initial prices can stick with us. But now let's talk about something that seems to have like a magical pull on all of us.
Okay.
And that is free.
Oh.
Free.
It's irresistible.
It is irresistible. It has this incredible allure.
It does.
And Ariely argues that 0 is not just another price point on the scale.
Yeah.
It's an emotional trigger.
It's a hot button.
It sets off all kinds of things in our brains, and it makes us act irrationally. Think about it. How many times have you, like, grabbed a free pen or a T-shirt at a conference,
Nope. Yeah.
even though you know you'll probably never use it?
All the time. The drawers are full of it.
It's full of free stuff, right?
Exactly.
Or stood in a really long line just to get a little free sample of ice cream or something.
Right.
Or, you know, bought 2 things that you don't really need just to get the third one for free.
Oh, yeah. Guilty of that one for sure.
We've all been there, so free can definitely make us do things that we wouldn't normally consider.
It makes us act irrationally.
It really does. But Ariely also shares this really interesting experiment about Halloween candy that suggests that maybe kids are actually a little bit more logical than us adults.
Oh, okay. How so?
So they did this experiment where they gave kids a choice between getting 3 small Hershey's Kisses or a larger Snickers bar.
Okay.
But in order to get the Snickers bar, they had to give up 1 or 2 of the Kisses. And most of the kids, even the younger ones, they chose the Snickers bar.
Oh, wow.
They seemed to understand that they were getting more chocolate.
Yeah.
They were getting more value, even if it meant giving up something that was technically free.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So even a kid in a pirate costume can sometimes see through the free hype
Right.
if the math is clear enough.
Yeah.
But then you have an example like what happened when AOL switched to a monthly fee for unlimited internet access.
Oh, yeah.
And they thought, a few more people are going to start using it. But what happened?
Didn't happen.
Oh, they got this huge surge in usage. It completely overloaded their systems.
Wow.
Because people were so drawn to this idea of unlimited access for a fixed price.
Right.
It's that feeling of like, once I've paid that monthly fee, everything else is free.
Yeah.
And it completely changed their behavior.
It really did.
Ah.
And free actually plays a really significant role in our social interactions as well.
Oh, how so?
Well, Ariely describes this experiment where they asked people to help move a sofa, and when they offered a small amount of money as payment, people were actually less likely to help than if they didn't offer any money at all.
Really?
It's really strange, isn't it?
That is weird.
But they found that offering a small gift, like a box of chocolates, that was often enough to get people to help. But if they then mentioned how much that gift cost,
Yeah.
suddenly people were much less willing to help again.
Wow.
So it seems like introducing even a small monetary aspect, like through the cost of a gift,
Yeah.
it shifts that interaction from the realm of social norms to market norms.
Oh, and that's a really important distinction that you're bringing up.
It really is.
This idea of social norms versus market norms.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So social norms are basically the unwritten rules of how we interact with each other. They're based on things like friendship and generosity and community spirit, things that we do because we want to help or because it feels like the right thing to do without any expectation of being paid back. Right. Market norms, on the other hand, are all about payment and contracts and self-interest.
Right.
Right. It's the typical dynamics of the marketplace where we exchange money for goods and services.
So like in your own personal life.
Yeah.
If you need to borrow a cup of sugar from your neighbor,
Right.
you don't pay them $5.
Right. You just ask.
You just ask. It's a social norm.
Exactly.
Versus if you needed your lawn mowed, you'd probably pay somebody to do that, right?
Right. That would be more of a market norm.
A market norm. And Ariely talks about this scrambled sentence task experiment. I love the names of these experiments.
Yeah.
Where the people who were working on these sentences that contained words related to money,
Okay.
they were actually less likely to ask for help when they had a difficult puzzle to solve.
Oh, wow.
Compared to the people who are working on sentences that had just like neutral words in them.
So just thinking about money
Just thinking about money.
can make us less likely to ask for help.
It puts us in that more self-reliant mindset.
That's right.
We're in that market-oriented headspace.
And the concerning thing is that once you introduce market norms into a social exchange, that social norm can be really hard to get back.
It can be?
Like that sense of goodwill and community, it can be really easily undermined.
Yeah.
If you start introducing a transactional way of thinking, think about your own relationships. If you start keeping track of every little favor you do for somebody,
Oh, yeah.
it changes the dynamic.
It feels different.
It does.
And this has all sorts of implications for our own lives, right? Like you were saying, asking a friend for a favor versus actually hiring somebody to do it.
Absolutely. If you need a friend to help you move or to watch your kids, it's okay to offer a small gift or a token of appreciation.
Right.
But if you offer to pay them an hourly wage,
Yeah.
it just changes the relationship.
It feels different.
Right. And we see this in the business world all the time too, right?
Yeah.
Companies are always trying to figure out ways to improve employee morale and productivity.
Yeah.
And one way they try to do that is by, creating a sense of community, making it feel like a family having these perks.
Yeah.
But then they often undermine that
Right.
by emphasizing short-term profits and cost-cutting measures like reducing benefits.
Yeah,
And it sends a mixed message, right?
it does.
Like, well, we want you to feel like you're part of this family, but we're also going to cut your health insurance,
Right.
So it's a delicate balance.
It is a very delicate balance, and it makes me think about Ariely's example of police officers and firefighters and soldiers. These are people who are literally putting their lives on the line every day, and they're not doing it primarily for the salary.
No.
They're doing it because of social norms, but duties honor a sense of purpose.
That's right.
And he contrasts that with a U.S. customs agent that he encountered who had a very pragmatic, very market-driven perspective.
Right.
How much risk am I willing to take for my paycheck?
Yeah, it was a very different way of looking at things.
It was, and it makes me think about the implications for things like education.
Oh, yeah.
Ariely suggests that really cultivating a genuine sense of curiosity, a love of learning, that might be a lot more effective in the long run than just focusing on standardized test scores and teacher bonuses.
Yeah.
Because you can't buy somebody's intrinsic motivation.
You can't.
All right.
Speaking of things we can't buy, let's talk about something I know a lot of us struggle with, and that's procrastination and self-control.
Okay, that's my specialty right there.
Oh, yeah.
My to-do list is a testament to the power of procrastination.
I think most of us have been there.
Yeah.
Putting off those tasks that we know we should be doing even when it's not in our best interest.
Even when we know it's just going to make things harder later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Ariely, being Ariely, he actually looked into this with a really interesting experiment involving student paper deadlines.
Okay.
So he gave one class the option to set their own deadlines throughout the semester, but with penalties for missing them. Another class had no deadlines at all, just a final submission date at the end.
Okay.
And the third class had instructor-imposed deadlines that were evenly spaced throughout the semester.
Oh, okay.
So he had these three different groups.
Three different groups with three different deadline situations.
That's right.
What happened?
Well, the students who got to set their own deadlines, even though they risked those penalties,
Yeah.
they actually ended up getting better grades than the students who had no deadlines at all.
Really?
It seems like they recognized their own tendency to procrastinate,
Yeah.
and they used those self-imposed deadlines to force themselves to stay on track.
I love that.
Isn't that interesting?
It is.
They actually even outperformed the class with the evenly spaced instructor-imposed deadlines.
Really?
Which is really interesting.
Wow.
It really shows the power of pre-commitment.
Right.
Like, if we can recognize our own weaknesses and we can put those structures in place
Yeah.
to help us avoid temptation,
Yeah.
it could be really effective.
And the students who did the best were the ones who were most aware of their procrastination tendencies and set earlier deadlines.
That's all right.
So they were really honest with themselves about, I'm going to put this off until the last minute, so I'm going to set my deadline for 2 weeks before it's actually due.
That's right.
Very smart. And this applies to so many areas of our lives.
It does.
I mean, we see it with dieting,
Yeah.
saving money, exercising, all those things where we have the best of intentions.
We do.
But then those immediate temptations are just so powerful.
It's hard to resist.
So what can we do? I mean, Ariely does suggest there's real value in these external voices, like those instructor set deadlines.
Yeah.
And trying to find ways to create these self-imposed pre-commitment strategies where there's real consequences if we don't follow through.
Right. Put some skin in the game.
Exactly. And it makes me think about those societal rules that we have. Like if you jaywalk, you get a ticket.
Right.
Or you have to wear your seatbelt. You can't smoke in restaurants anymore.
Right.
These are all kind of external controls that are designed for our own good.
For our own good.
Right. And it's not always a bad thing.
No, not at all. Sometimes we need that extra little push.
We do. And he even had this really interesting idea about, how to get people to actually go to their important medical appointments.
Oh, yeah.
He suggested that, if you had to put down a refundable deposit for something like a cholesterol screening,
Okay.
so you put down a little bit of money, but you get it back if you actually go to the appointment.
I love that.
So it's like a financial incentive to follow through on taking care of your health.
That's brilliant.
Isn't that a good idea?
It is. And I also love the example of Ford Motor Company. They bundle all these routine car maintenance services together.
Right.
And it really simplifies things for people.
Yes,
right?
it does.
Instead of trying to remember all those different service intervals, it's just all taken care of at once.
Mm-hmm.
And Ariely suggests we could actually apply this bundling concept to medical tests as well,
Oh, yeah.
to improve patient adherence and potentially even lower healthcare costs overall.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving right along here, let's talk about this whole fascinating topic of the high price of ownership.
Oh, yeah.
And this is about a lot more than just, the monetary value that we assign to things we own, isn't it?
It really is. It goes much deeper than that. Ariely introduces this concept called the endowment effect.
The endowment effect.
Yeah, and this is basically our tendency to overvalue something simply because we own it.
Right.
It becomes
right.
ours, and suddenly it's more valuable.
It's like our precious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he uses this classic example of the Duke basketball ticket lottery.
Oh, yeah.
The students who didn't win a ticket in the lottery, they were willing to pay a certain amount of money to buy one.
Okay.
But the students who did win a ticket,
Yeah.
they demanded a price to sell theirs that was, on average, 14 times higher.
That's crazy.
It's wild, isn't it? It's not just about the face value of the ticket.
Right.
It's about that perceived loss
Right.
of not being able to go to the game.
So once you own something, it becomes much harder to part with it.
Absolutely. And there are a couple of reasons for this.
Okay.
One is what we call loss aversion.
Loss aversion.
So the pain of losing something
Yeah.
feels much more intense than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value.
Right.
So when we think about selling our old car,
Yeah.
we tend to focus on what we'll be losing, the ability to use it,
Right.
rather than the money we'll gain from selling it.
Right.
And the other reason is what Ariely calls the IKEA effect.
The IKEA effect. I love it.
Yeah.